March 11th, 2014, and today it is 41 degrees on my drive to work. You can see the roads are nice and clear, nice and warm. Well, we're getting ready for Snowmageddon 5. That's right, we got another winter storm coming. It's supposed to be here Wednesday or Thursday, probably late Wednesday night, early Thursday morning, so I'll be sure to capture that. Anyway, this morning I want to talk about Providence, luck, fortune, good karma, I guess, and it's kind of a look into why I think the way I do, what drives my decisions, what drives my faith. Take a look at my face here. And it's got a story time, and I'll probably make it multiple parts just to give the story its due. But it all started, well, I wouldn't say all started, but from my earliest recollection and putting kind of the pieces together, it all started when I was very young, obviously, probably 5 or 6 years old. And from what I can recall, I was I was your average kid, I guess you could call it. I was pretty fortunate. I was a very fortunate kid, even in relative terms, even, you know, compared to American kids. I wasn't I didn't have the best, you know, we didn't grow up rich or anything like that, but we were pretty fortunate, a pretty fortunate family. And why is one family more fortunate than another? I don't know. My faith tells me that God has a higher plan for me, has already used me as part of his plan, and is continuing to use me as part of his plan. But the more I think about it, it even starts earlier than when I was 5 or 6 years old. My grandfather, from what I was told, actually fought with Ho Chi Minh to try to drive the French out of Vietnam. The story's kind of murky, and it's, you know, it's, I don't know, the details are vague at best, but I was told from family members that my grandfather our family was actually pretty well off at one time. We owned a lot of property, we had farms and stuff like that. But during the war with the French, not with Americans, with the French, that when my grandfather fought with Ho Chi Minh, and when the war was over, when the French left and the Americans were coming in, my grandfather said, "Hey, look, I've got no fight with the Americans. You know, it was to get the French out, and that's done." And Ho Chi Minh, long story short, said, "Well, okay, you know, you've been a faithful, helper, I guess, comrade." And so, because you've helped me with the French, I won't kill you. Yeah, that's communism for you. So basically, Ho Chi Minh didn't kill my grandfather or have my grandfather killed, but he said, "Well, now, you know, but I'm going to take all your property. Your property belongs to the people of Vietnam now." So he stripped my grandfather of all his property. You know, my grandfather still had a little bit of property, but not the vast expanse like he had. And of course, from what I was told, my grandfather, I get, anyway, that's a different story. But so where was I going with this? But anyway, so my grandfather, lived on to have my mother, get married my grandmother, and my mother was born, and eventually me, and we so that was kind of like the butterfly effect. That was one piece of the puzzle that happened. If it didn't happen, or if it happened a different way, I wouldn't be here. The next major part of my life that suggests to me that there's a higher power working in my life is that when I was 6 years old, of course the communists were in full swing in Vietnam, and they were getting ready to take over the whole country. My dad adopted, let me back up. Well, no, let me keep going. I'll tell that other story later. But my dad adopted, married my mother, adopted all my brother and sisters, and even a cousin of mine. And he was an American citizen. And he moved us all to the U.S. Now he was, he could have happily retired and lived a comfortable life, but no, he chose to take on this family that weren't his. He took responsibility for us and gave us a new lease on life. He was I look up to him a lot, and probably need to look up to him more in my daily life. But anyway, that was another episode of my life that suggests to me that I've got that God has a plan for me. The next major event was kind of a funny story. When I graduated high school, I wanted to join the Navy and go into the nuclear program because that was where the money was at. So I took my test and stuff like that, and I qualified for the nuclear program, and I went to the MEPS, which is the medical, there's a name for it, but basically my physical. And at the end of the screening, the medical screening, they classified you as to what job you were going to get. And of course nuclear required a top secret clearance, and you had to be a U.S. citizen to qualify. So the guy in charge of classifying what job I would get told me, hey, it's no big deal. I've been in the States for 13 years. And the guy said, well, and I spoke perfect English. I didn't have an accent or anything. Not a Vietnamese accent anyway. But he said, hey, no big deal. When you come back, when you actually on your way, because you have to go back through MEPS, from what I remember, or I can't quite remember what the whole detail was, but I remember we had to go back to MEPS for one more thing before we actually went off to boot camp, because I was in delayed entry. I went in like a year early. I signed a contract a year early before my actual boot camp date. But anyway, he said, before you go off the boot camp, just make sure you get us your birth certificate. And it's like, oh, that's no problem. I carry this around with me all the time. It's, you know, I've been told it was as good as a birth certificate, and it was my green card. Apparently, I thought, my understanding was, because my dad was a citizen, he adopted me, I was his legal child, so I thought that made me an automatic citizen. And it did. I just had to file for it when I was 18. Well, I didn't know that. So, I was legally not a citizen yet, so I could not get the classification, or the nuclear classification that I needed. So the guy was like, oh no, we got to get you, we got to classify you for a different job. So they gave me these cards to look at, and these cards were like job descriptions, and I'm looking through them, and I knew from my brother, because my brother was in the Navy, I knew what not to get, but I really wasn't sure what I did want besides nuclear. I mean, I had my heart set on nuclear. So anyway, he gave me these 3 cards, and out of these 3 cards, the first one was BT. So you Navy guys out there know what BT was, and I sure knew I did not want to be a BT. I'm sure the comments below eventually will tell you what a BT is, and you can look it up if you want. So I didn't want to be a BT for sure. The next card was PN, and what a PN is, it's like a file clerk, and I hated paperwork. I hated paperwork with a passion. Ironically, that's what I do now. But anyway, back to the story. So a PN is a personnelman. They took care of all the personnel records for whatever unit you were attached to. And I was like, nope, can't do it. And then the last card he gave me was an AMS. And there are different classifications. It's AM now. It's just purely, the designation is called AM now. But back then they had them split, I think 3 ways: AMS, AMH, and AME. And I was, mine was an AMS. I didn't know that from, you know, LMNOP. It was just alphabet soup to me, but it had wings on the symbol. They were cross hammers with wings. And I was reading the description, and it said, you know, you're going to be fixing airframes and a whole bunch of other words that I didn't quite understand. And I was like, well, I like airplanes, and that symbol was kind of cool, right? It's got wings on it. Wings are cool, so I chose that. You know, I was all disappointed I didn't get my nuclear job. So they said, well, once you file for citizenship and you get it, you can reclassify and go nuclear if you want. All right, you know. Well, fast forward 5 years later, 4 years later. Anyway, after my first enlistment was almost over, I was living in California, and I couldn't afford to live in California anymore. And I wanted to go to the East Coast, where I was told it was cheaper, because there was a guy, my neighbor in California, in the apartment I lived in. He's like, oh yeah, go to. He had been stationed in Virginia before, and I think that's where he's from. And he's like, no man, Virginia is much cheaper than California. He was just happened to be on a ship that started out in Virginia and ended up. They moved the ship to California, and then he quickly got another ship back in Norfolk. But he said, yeah, Virginia's a lot cheaper. So I was like, oh, okay. So I tried to get, when I was up for orders after my first enlistment, I wanted to go to California, or to Virginia. And I don't know if it's still there, but there's a myth that West Coast sailors say about the East Coast, in that there are signs in the yard saying sailors and dogs keep off the grass, and they hate sailors, and Virginia is very anti-military and stuff like that. This was back in '91, and I was like, oh man, scared to death. Even my brother told me these things. He'd been on the West Coast his whole career. So I was like, oh well, I'm gonna have to bite the bullet, because I can't afford to live here in California anymore. Well, it turns out that the job classification that I was in, I was eligible to take another technical school called non-destructive test school. They call it non-destructive inspection school in what is that? In Tennessee, because I had a coworker who went to non-destructive inspection school, and he came back, and I was kind of talking to him, because he kind of disappeared, of course, because he went to school. And I was telling him, yeah, I want to go to Virginia. And he goes, oh, that's easy. Just qualify for this school, or just request a school, and then from there you can go on to Virginia or anywhere else you wanted to go. Because I had been on the phone with they call them detailers, with the guys that that help you get your next set of orders, and everything I could get was on the West Coast. I think I got Woodby Island, Washington. I could have gone up to Miramar. I think there was Fallon, Nevada. And I was like, no, I got to get out of the West Coast. But so I got to school, and I was able to transfer on to Virginia, which turned out to be a really nice duty station for me. I mean, there were no signs of dogs and sailors keep off the grass or anything like that, and it was fine. I mean, I would say 60 or 70% of the population were either military or retired military, and the rest of the population either had a relative in the military or knew somebody. Obviously had to have known somebody in the military. So I don't know where that myth started, probably in the 70s or something, but it just kind of lingered. But anyway, long story short, the end of a long story. If I hadn't gotten classified as an aviation or an aircraft mechanic, I wouldn't have gotten that job, that school that was able to get me to the East Coast. And then, of course, what I do now is 100% related to that non-destructive inspection school. So I find that to be just a little bit more than coincidental. Looking back 2020. Hindsight is 2020. But anyway, that's my story for today. Catch you later.